week? Did you watch it at one of the film festivals pre-COVID? That live stream should start now. People can comment both in the chat box, and if you're on YouTube Live, there should be a live chat option. Just waiting for YouTube Live to catch up. Perfect. There we go. Okay, so we are loving these comments. Thank you so much. So the filmmakers are going to come on shortly and they can see your comments now. So please, any thoughts, questions, comments, please put them in those Zoom chat and also on the live chat on YouTube Live. So we're allowing people a couple of minutes just to get their sound settings right, and obviously me a couple of minutes just to get our YouTube Live going. So in the meantime, just to let you know, we do have live captioning going. You can select this at the bottom if you're not already seeing it. By clicking on, there may be a CC logo, or if you click on the 3 dots that say more, it will offer you the captioning. This is so lovely. Wait, I'm going to. Perfect. Okay. So as well as being live streamed on YouTube, we are going to be recording this video. This video is going to live on the Human Rights Watch Film Festival Vimeo page, as well as Human Rights Watch's YouTube site. We will be posting that link into the chat box, as well as other links throughout. So if you keep that up on the right-hand side, you can see what's going on, not just from other folks, but I have my colleagues from the film festival here. Yeah, please engage wherever throughout this session. Also, if you would like us to speak more slowly or clearly, if there are any issues with your audio, please type into the box. We will ensure that that's passed on to our panelists as well. So just as a bit of background, so we sadly recently needed to cancel our Human Rights Watch Film Festival, the London edition, due to COVID-19. Obviously the COVID-19 pandemic that's hit a lot of our film festivals, or a lot of film festivals around the world, as well as impacted the film industry as a whole, as well as all of our personal lives. And this amazing documentary, Crip Camp, would have had its European premiere on March 17th, where our panelists today actually would have joined us on stage before the Netflix release on March 25th. But now we're lucky because we get to share the conversation with audiences around the world, along with the global Netflix release. So there's one silver lining there. Today's Human Rights Watch Film Festival Film Club is co-presented by our London partners, the Barbican and Regent Street Cinemas. We also want to thank the players of the postcode lottery, People's Postcode Lottery, for their support of the festival. And we're still finding ways to work with some of the films that were part of our London edition lineup. So please stay tuned. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We will again be putting links to that in the chat area, and we can notify you of future online events. So I'm going to introduce our panelists in a moment, but first I want to let you know how the event will run. So the first 15-20 minutes, we're going to have an in-conversation between filmmakers Nicole Newnham and Jim LeBrecht, along with our senior researcher and advocate in the Disability Rights Division at Human Rights Watch, Carlos Ríos Espinosa. During this first section, Jim, Nicole, and Carlos will not be answering questions from the audience, but please feel free to add questions and comments, again, in that chat box via Zoom or in YouTube live chat, and we'll be pulling from those questions for the second part of the conversation. Again, a reminder, streaming live and being recorded. So if you do want to ask an anonymous question, there is an option in the Zoom chat box to send to all panelists instead of all panelists and attendees. And this will mean your message will not post into this public chat box. So, oh, I'm loving these comments here. They're really great. Thanks everyone for joining us. We've got some people from all around the world here. Really exciting. Okay, and now I am going to bring in our panelists. So bear with me as we unmute and allow for everyone to join us. Start videos, please. Hello.
So good evening.
Nicole. Can you start videos? Let's see. Ask to start videos. Yay. Let's get Jim up here. Brilliant.
Hi.
Hey, everyone. So I'm just going to briefly introduce everyone that we have here. So we have the writer, director, producers of Crip Camp, Nicole Newnham, who is an Emmy-winning documentary producer and director, 4-time Sundance Film Festival alumnus, and 5-time Emmy nominee. We also have Jim LeBrecht, who has over 40 years of experience as a film and theatre sound designer and mixer, author, disability rights activist, and filmmaker. Jim is currently a board member at the Disability Rights Education and Defence Fund, which works for the rights of the disabled through education, legislation, and litigation. And you may recognise him from the film you just watched. And both Nicole and Jim are tuning in here from California. So welcome, West Coast.
Thank you.
And then in Mexico City, we have Carlos Ríos Espinosa, who is a senior researcher and advocate at the Disability Rights Division of Human Rights Watch. Carlos is a lawyer and expert on international disability rights and criminal justice. And Crip Camp did resonate particularly strongly or personally with Carlos because he went to a similar-ish summer camp, which I'm sure he'll tell you about shortly. But just before I hand this over, I just want to thank you, Jim and Nicole, for being here and for your incredible film. As you can see, we're getting amazing response from audiences, and we personally loved the film. We're so excited to be able to work with the film still, even if it's on a different sort of stage than we had. And I'll be watching on the sidelines and join you again in about 20 minutes. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Really, it's a pleasure to be able to, such a privilege to be able to chat with you today. Good evening to everybody who's listening. Well, I'm going to start by saying, well, what my impression was on seeing Crip Camp, because I was asked by our film festival colleagues to review the film, so and make some initial remarks on it. It was supposed to be showing on the London Film Festival, and I need to say that I was really impressed, by the film in terms of, well, the technical making of the film, and the contents were absolutely wonderful, for someone who has lived experience on disability. My name is Carlos, and I got polio when I was 4 months old, so it really sounded right to me, because I was able to go to Berkeley when I was 21 years old in 1987, and I remember saying, well, wow, that was the first time I used a wheelchair, a power wheelchair. Before that, I wasn't able to use a power wheelchair because Mexico is very inaccessible. So my brother was studying at Berkeley and invited me, to see you have to come here. You have to come here. You won't believe, the accessibility here. This was 1987, no. So I was there, and I said, whoa, yeah, this is incredible, no. But I didn't imagine what was behind it, no. So I remember that when I saw Crip Camp at the beginning of the year, I sent to my colleagues, well, you have to see this, because behind all this accessibility, and really inclusiveness of people with physical disabilities in Berkeley, there was blood, sweat, and tears, of the disability community in the U.S., Americans that with disabilities that managed to do this in an organized way. People like you, Jim, or like Judy Newman, who also is a member of an advisory committee at the Disability Rights Division in Human Rights Watch. So this was incredible. It made me reflect on the importance of having a strong disability community to really push for individual rights. This is very difficult to do in terms individually. So it made me think about the enormous importance of how I was growing up. It wasn't there. Now this has been starting to change in most countries. In Mexico, we have also a disability community now that's struggling hardly. But when I was a young guy, I really related with what you, Jim, say in the film. So you felt different. You felt like you were always the guy who was not going to make it. I went to mainstream schools, but I always had this message of, oh, okay, so your family is gonna, of course, take care of you all your life. You won't be able to marry. You won't have kids. You won't. No. So you start to sort of like interiorize to believe, on those issues. You start developing sort of like a twisted version of yourself, a spoiled identity, some authors have called it, So seeing the film and seeing how the U.S., the Americans with disability had this space, to really discuss things and sort of like to be involved, in the movement and fighting for the rights. It was amazing. So can you develop a little bit? I would appreciate that if you could develop in terms of what this film meant to you, Jim, and what do you hope to accomplish with it?
Thank you, Carlos. Excuse me. The film has meant so much to me that I had felt like with all of the other films I have seen out there around disability, I felt like that people weren't getting the message of what it's really like in our community. So many of these things were looking down upon us, but that you really weren't hearing things in the true, really from all of us. And I remember this one day coming into the editing room, and Nicole had been working with our editor, and they showed me a scene, and I thought to myself, wow, well, maybe now people will understand. And I don't even remember exactly what that scene was, but it was this emotional response I had. So I think that the hopes for the film was that, our hope for the film was that we were going to help reframe what it meant to have a disability or be disabled in the minds of people inside the community and outside the community. That just as important as kind of raising awareness for people who may not be part of our community, it was important for people to identify and to hopefully, and what we've been seeing in comments and such that we're getting, that people are watching the film and getting a really strong sense of pride. And you can't advocate for yourself. You can't fight for yourself if you don't feel a certain amount of agency and pride.
Thank you so much for that, Jim. Nicole, do you want to add to that? Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said, Carlos, about visibility, the importance of visibility and the importance of kind of a strong, visible disability community was something that we really carried close to our hearts in making the film. We wanted to tell the story of the community and its activism in the 70s and make it clear that it was this, you know, powerful, really revolutionary activism and coming together that changed the world for everybody's benefit. But we also wanted to, you know, Corbett O'Toole, who's in the film, said the kindest thing to us. She said that we had made a love letter to the disability community. And that's really what we tried to do, because we wanted people to want to be a part of it, you know. We wanted to show all the joy and all the ingenuity and all of the kind of incredible talent that's a part of it. And also that kind of incredible liberation of being part of a community that cuts across so much difference, that the way the community comes together is through trust and love, you know. And I'm seeing a lot of comments here about joy, which I'm really loving, because, you know, I worked on another film about a gentleman named Jack Geiger, who made the first public health clinic during the civil rights movement. And he would always say that, I mean, he was working in really hard conditions, and, you know, people were putting bombs on his car and it was very difficult, but he would say that the joy that he and his colleagues had in what they were creating is what drove the change forward. And I feel like you really see that both at the camp and then all the way through, you know, into the movement, that kind of that profound happiness and joy in community. And that was something also we wanted to kind of take from the community and gift out into the world.
I wonder if you can develop a little bit further on how Camp Jeanette was structured. You know, I myself went to summer camp in 1975 in California, but it was a bit different because in our case, counselors didn't have disabilities. This was different in the case of Camp Jeanette, because I think counselors also had an involvement, no, on activities, on inclusion, and I don't know if you could please let us, or if you can develop further on that, Jim. Thanks.
Well, you know, Larry Allison started hiring folks as counselors as they were kind of not aging out, but that they, you know, were getting older and wanted to work. And indeed, that was something that was, I believe, rather unique at the time. And as we mentioned in the film, it was really great as, and this is not a pun, but a role model. So for us at the camp, that we could see people like Judy Heumann or Pat Figueroa, and see them in a position of power, position of employment, and certainly as a 15-year-old at the time, it was really important for me to meet elders or folks that were older than me that had substantial lives outside of camp.
What were the ages? You know, who were the youngest and who were the oldest in Jeanette?
The camp was broken up into teen camp and adult camp.
Okay.
And so adult camp had people that were well into their 60s, maybe a little bit older. Teen camp, I think the cutoff probably was in the neighborhood of maybe 25 or so. It just kind of depended. I know that Judy was 23 at the time. She was working there at that time, but you know, Steve Hoffman was going to college. So a number of people were college students at the point that I was there.
And Jim, that's unusual, right, for summer camps? to have people coming at older ages like that. But that was part of the philosophy, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, but indeed also, I think it was recognized that were not a lot of options for people with disabilities simply to get out of the city and have a vacation or to be able to be out in nature. So, indeed, it was, kind of rare for anybody that non-disabled to kind of go to camp after they were maybe going off, exiting high school. But for us, it was, it was about the only thing we could have at the time that really felt like, well, you can't quite call Camp Jeanette a resort, but you get the idea.
Yeah, right. And there are, I was wondering, what lies ahead? No, because in the U.S., well, of course, you have the ADA, which is super important piece of legislation for all Americans with disabilities. But do you think it's enough? No, or would you say there are other issues that need to be addressed in the United States? I've been, for example, looking at the situation of how the support for people with disabilities to live in the community is not as good in all states in the US. No, for example, you have very good things happening in places like New York City. Well, now with the COVID things, it's horrible, but other places that are really, really bad. No, say for example, like Texas. No, and the way in which those states are lagging behind on disability rights. So what would you say would be important to do in the US on the implementation of disability rights?
Well, I think that you're probably referring to what you may have seen in Jason De Silva's film When We Walk.
Exactly.
Which, Jason had made When I Walk, and he lives in New York and is able to live in his own his apartment because the in-home healthcare services are pretty good in New York from what we can see. But his wife he and his wife split up, and she moved to Texas, and he wanted to be close to his son, and he could not live independently under what they were offered in Texas. He had to move into a nursing home, which I think lasted less than 2 days. Was just so horrible for him.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I think there's a couple of things that are very much needed right now, and probably the top thing is this ability to live within your community and not be warehoused in a nursing home or worse. Mm-hmm. And the fact that there are not federal standards for this, or that depending where you live, you're really screwed, is reprehensible.
Right.
The other things are, and I we've been talking about this a lot, and I really realized last night that my own situation, I feel very fortunate, but I went from a group plan to an individual healthcare plan. And when I went to the individual plan, my ostomy my CPAP supplies were no longer being covered, and wheelchair repair or purchase, which was the cap was pretty small anyway, but no more wheelchair repairs are being covered underneath my insurance, and I can't get coverage as an individual. Oh. So Lord knows that my CPAP has been going for about 4 or 5 years, but it's a $5,000 machine.
Piece of instrument, yeah.
Yeah, and just very briefly, may I just add to it? The fact that none of us can really travel as wheelchair users, can't travel in our chairs on airplanes, or nor use the bathroom, is it was one of the hardest things about working on our film. For Nicole and I, it's absolutely the you go to places like Sundance has got an incredible edit lab, and we have things like these festivals and stuff that we were going to, And to be honest with you, to go from California to London, we had to book me for an overnight in New York just so I could use the bathroom.
Yeah, horrible things. Nicole, turning to you, would it be possible for you to share with us what are the positive and negative experience that you had working on this as a person that doesn't have disabilities? What is your take on that?
The positives are more numerous than the negatives. I feel so grateful to have this project, and I've felt grateful for years to know Jim, and really grateful for how open and generous Jim is with sharing his advocacy and sharing his political point of view, and kind of opening a door for those of us who have worked with him in the film industry, because we came together, having worked together on a number of other documentaries that I've directed over the course of 15 years. And he's just about the best, sound mixer and sound designer in the documentary world. And so he knows he's got a position to be able to share a lot with people who are making, influencing culture and the media. And so that has been amazing. And the film and the experience of getting to know the community of Genetians, and, being able to have a relationship with someone like Judy Heumann, and in fact, all of the people who are featured in the film has just been an incredible blessing for me. But I think, it has definitely opened my eyes to how rare it is that when people talk about diversity or they talk about equity, and I'm talking about non-disabled people, they think about disability as being a full part of that, and we did see that over and over as we were fundraising, as we were pitching the project, as we were traveling, navigating around in the world. And here I am with a co-director who needs to have access to the same things that I have access to, and seeing how difficult that was, or seeing how really so many times when you're talking to people, even who specifically are working on issues around equity or diversity, the idea of including disability fully in that is new to them. That has been a challenge, but something that I'm hopeful that the film, I think the film already has played a role in making some change in the industry around that, and that's certainly our goal in terms of pushing it out in the world.
Great, Nicole. Thank you so much. Well, we're now going to jump to questions from the public, which is great. Thank you for coming. And there's a lot of people engaging with this. And could you please lead us into the questions from our audience? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Carlos, for hosting that conversation too. And we have some questions for all three of you coming in, which is great. There's been a lot of questions. We've had some on YouTube Live as well as here in Zoom. And one question that came through was wanting to hear about the discovery of this camp archive, or how you actually got access to this work, because it's just, it's amazing, obviously, what you're able to capture in here. The people would love to hear that story.
Well, Jim had, when we first started talking about how are we going to make the film, and how would we visualize Camp Jened, and how would we bring people back into it, Jim said, well, there's this film about this crabs epidemic that took place at Camp Jened, and there was this old kind of 8-minute long documentary that had been made out of the People's Video Theater footage, which was shot at Camp Jened that summer in 1971. That was sort of like a bootleg copy that was floating around the Jened community. And Jim said, yeah, but they were there for a while. And I remember they handed me the camera, and I strapped the Portapak on the back of my wheelchair, and I filmed a tour of the camp. I'm like, oh my God, really, there might be this whole trove of archival footage out there, but Jim, you didn't remember the whole name of the group, just that there was people something, So so we looked and looked and looked online for months and finally found a little notice in the back of an old kind of Video Freaks magazine that said, you know, crabs outbreak at Camp Jened for the Handicapped by the People's Video Theater. And then we're able to track down Howard Gutstad and Ben Levine, who, you know, not only did Howard live across the bridge from us in San Francisco, but he had 5.5 hours of this footage that they had shot. And Ben, I guess, had moved 17 times. So miraculously, the footage was still intact, and they were in the midst of transferring it to digitizing it. And we were able to work with them, and they were incredibly generous. And I think the thing that's so wonderful about this and kind of almost poetic is that their spirit and their intention in capturing the footage in 1971 was so close to our intention in telling the story today. So when Jim and I went to meet Howard to talk about this for the first time, it was very emotional, actually, just the idea that Jim had started out making this film so long ago, 50 years ago, and is picking it up and continuing the storytelling today.
It's just amazing what good quality it's in condition it's in too. I know it's hard to be restoring all of that film footage. Okay, we have so many here. I mean, it is interesting, as people have commented here about like the support that this film has got. So the fact that Netflix has pushed it out in such a huge way. I know you have the Obamas executive producing. You won the Audience Award at Sundance Film Festival. Can you talk a little bit about why you think this film has hit? Obviously, it's an amazing soundtrack. There's fun. There's talk about crabs. You know, what else can you want? But why do you think this issue that is very often not talked about and normalized in this sense, if just like having humans talk about their experience, why do you think this has captured the attention and done so well so far?
Are you talking specifically kind of about the discussions around sexuality and such?
I'm saying, sorry, the film. Why do you think the film has hit home with so many people, got the support from Netflix and the Obamas? I mean, it's just done incredibly well so far. I just wondered, we've got here, in terms of bringing it to the Netflix, was this something that was immediately grabbed onto as a concept for a film? How do you think you've brought this into such a public sphere of conversation, disability rights and this historical film, which is often quite hard to gain an audience for?
I think that when you see this black and white footage from Camp Jened, it's very addictive. You want to see more and more of it, and I think that was probably one of the big calling cards that helped attract people to the film. Nicole?
Well, I also think it's you, Jim, too. I mean, you know, with that, from the moment that Jim kind of, you know, tumbles down the stairs in the beginning of the film, and I think the tone of the film is both insider. It's people within the community sharing their stories with each other, which was something that was really important to us, that it feel that way. So people who are being interviewed and telling the story are talking to Jim, so they're talking to someone who understands and has a shared experience. But also when we interviewed Jim, we had Jim talking to Denise. So it's this very intimate feeling of being allowed to enter into the community in that way, but at the same time, you are being challenged, but you're being challenged in kind of a loving way. So it's an invitation, but it's also a provocation, I think. And I think that's, it's just really compelling to people. I don't think people want to feel cut off from, you know, a large segment of society. And people want to experience shared humanity and fun and joy and all of the things that the film is made up of. So I feel like it feels to us like certainly it's something that the disability community has been waiting for in a certain sense, to see this history given its proper due, but it's also to see an authentic portrayal. But I feel like it's also something that everyone has been waiting for, you know. it's just maybe surprising that it's taken so long.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a great question come in for all three of you, asking, what do you think, and it's a tough question, I mean, what do you think the priorities should be for protecting the rights of those with disabilities in the context of COVID-19? It's a big question.
Well, I would, sorry, go ahead, Jim.
I would love to hear what you have to say.
Okay, we just issued some recommendations last week, and we see at the very start, we saw little focus on what the issues are for people with disabilities. And I would say the general recommendations that are giving to the people should include also a specific approach on people with disabilities. So people are saying, well, wash your hands, but I wouldn't be able to wash my hands in the way they are showing, so please give recommendations to people on how to do that. So like when you're on a plane, for example, and the oxygen mask go down, say, well, the recommendation is please wash your hands first and then support the person with a disability, and then wash your hands again. For example, simple things like that. Or other issue is on people living in institutions. I wouldn't imagine what would it be if someone got the virus, and how you should. So countries should take this opportunity to really actively push the institutionalization for people with disabilities, because they are at a higher risk at this very moment of getting that virus. Jim, sorry.
No. I think back to having seen something online where some, the health official has said, well, the good news is that most of the people that are dying are people who are, older, disabled, basically is what they were saying, with other underlying conditions, and as if that was an acceptable thing to say. And the thought that a lot of people I'm seeing online saying is that will it get so bad that just simply by rolling up to the emergency room in a wheelchair that you are immediately told to go home? I mean, so I think there's places like DREDF that have Disability Rights Education Defense Fund, DREDF.org, has on their page basically a one sheet that you can print out that talks about your rights, at least in the United States, when it comes to healthcare. But it's really going to take all of us to really yell and scream and contact people that we know to say that you just can't, people have to stop thinking this way.
Absolutely. And actually, I've seen this question come in a couple of times now, but in the film, what's a beautiful part of this film is looking at the support from other sectors, so the Black Panthers and unions, and a question is whether there are similar collaborations between groups now, so strategic allies, or what are the relationships now that the disability rights movement have come forth with since the making of the film, or since the era of the film?
I don't think that I'm the best person to answer that question. I don't think that I'm quite tied in, but I will say that we have been developing a rather robust impact campaign for the film, and that it is really, it's first off, it's been just one of the things that we are looking at among many things, like really looking at people, raising up the voices and stories of people that have been marginalized within the disability community. But one of the other things we're really looking at now is when we're trying to organize events or watch parties, really reaching out beyond the choir and really trying to go to organizations that are politically or socially active, but may not have a prime focus on disability. And kind of, trying to invite them inside our house.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the powerful things about the film and about the disability rights movement and the disability justice movement in the United States has been the power of its intersectionality, but there's still like there's a lot of other strategic alliances that can be strengthened, and we're hoping by bringing the film into conversation and by having discussions that are including people who have disabilities but also carry other identities, and come from these different groups, that we can help use the film as a way to have conversations that can strengthen some of those alliances.
Great, thank you. I'm going to read this one verbatim. It's a great one. We had someone saying they found the filmmaking interesting both in its acknowledgement of hierarchy of impairment in society and the voices profiled. Did you feel that this was something that was still present in your movement, despite the acknowledgement of Judy Newman, who's in the film obviously and is a friend of Human Rights Watch, I know, despite the acknowledgement that Judy would hold long meetings to include voices, what other steps did you take to tackle it? So I guess it's talking about this hierarchy of impairment is the term used here.
I'm a polio, by the way.
Have you felt on top your whole life?
No.
I think all of this is very individual for each person and how they feel. And I think that certainly part of the issues around hierarchy and cerebral palsy may very well have to do with how easy it is to understand your speech. And I think that was certainly part of it. I remember being just a kid at another summer camp, and I thought that I had cerebral palsy because all the kids I really liked playing baseball with had cerebral palsy. And I was actually distraught when the counselor said to me, no, you got spina bifida. I was like, what? So. And I think this happens in every community.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we're going to go through one more question, but also we're launching a poll. We're trying a poll just to ask people in their rooms, where people are coming from, what we can do to improve these conversations for next time. So I think that will launch into a separate window on people's pages. But I did want to ask, because I know you referenced some materials and ways that people can take action through your website, but maybe you could tell our viewers what they can do to make an impact around some of the disability rights issues that people are facing right now, as well as how we might be able to bring these conversations into our own communities. So that's for Carlos in your work with Human Rights Watch, as well as Nicole and Jim with your work rolling out this film.
I don't want to hog. I feel like I'm jumping in on every question, so I don't want to.
Okay.
You're a superstar. You're a superstar, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a star of my own zip code here. I think that if you're really interested in these kinds of issues, that there are local organizations virtually in almost every community, be it on the local or statewide level, and that searching them out and seeing how you can get involved with some of the things that are important to them is important. Nicole and I hope that our film would be a tool in which activists could use our film as a way to start talking about issues, but that by hosting screenings and such, they could really zero in on the things that were important in their own hometowns. And we've only, at Sundance, we had one screening that was for politicians and in Utah and their disabled constituents. And we found out later that one of those lawmakers was so moved by the film that they wanted to go back and really look at what they are doing in regards to transportation. So it's, so I think you gotta, we all have to kind of speak up and including people with disabilities, and I'm talking all disabilities, in diversity and inclusion efforts. If you're part of that and you're not seeing somebody with a disability that is part of this discussion, you have to raise your hand. You have to speak up and say, we don't have everybody at the table here that needs to be here. And if you don't know how to find those people, then that really says a lot about how far you need to go.
And if you want to get in touch with us and you want to engage with the film or use the film in any way, you can go to cripcamp.com. We're developing discussion guides, educational materials, and all of that. And you can sign up to be a part of our work with it moving forward.
Mm-hmm. I think it would be interesting to explore also the need for older generations, like the one I'm from, to sort of like help the coming generations, to tackle some difficult issues. When I was a youngster, I was very alone. As a person with a disability, there was no one to talk to. I didn't have the chance to have a summer camp like Jim did. My summer camp, I was 10 years old, and I was not really for 2 weeks, so it was too. I would have loved to have other groups. That happened to me later in life. When I was able to be part of the CRPG committee. That was my Crip Camp. And I was sort of like just understood. From others. And you really have to have a community. Because as a person with a disability, you start feeling, as Jim said, well, just like the different guy, the guy in the wheelchair, you start feeling really isolated. So I think the disability community has to push for building political spaces for people with disabilities around the world. Because organizing is in itself a difficult thing, and when you have a disability, it's worse. Because you cannot connect. Accessible transport is not available, or there are communication issues, or a lot of poverty. Most people with disabilities around the world are poor, so organizing is super hard. And so I think the people who are in a position of making a difference should engage, to promote this right. So I would really, really welcome this film, and I think it's an eye opener for many people. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to remind people, the Netflix version of this film does offer closed captioning for audience members who are deaf or hard of hearing, as well as audio description for audiences who are blind or visually impaired. So please let other folks know. We'll be circulating the link for this recorded video, so you can also share that with friends who have seen the film. So you can learn more about Carlos's work too. Oh, yes, Jim.
I just wanted to mention also, if you go to Netflix website for the film and you go to the details tab, there's a link there to download a script of the film that is a way that deaf blind people can experience our film. So it's like 116 pages long. I mean, it's just a really lovely, well-made document that really, really pushes the envelope in a wonderful way for full accessibility.
But only in English, right? Or in Spanish also, in other languages?
Let me get that back to Netflix, because I think you're right.
Yeah, and also tell them, by the way, to rethink the Spanish translation of Crip Camp, because the way it is now,
the subtitles are not working.
it's not working. It's called Extraordinary Camp. So yeah, giving the view that people with disabilities are extraordinary, which I think it's not the right message.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yes, so we will be posting, again, links in this chat. Also, we're able to download the transcript of this conversation that will go out with the video, as well as the text from the chat if people are interested. There's been some great questions and comments here we will share. And Carlos and his piece about, he actually wrote a dispatch on his time in his not quite as fun camp, but that was a great experience that obviously refreshed when watching the film. So that dispatch we'll put a link to, and that's also, you can follow the film and Carlos on Twitter. Please keep in touch with us too. We will have more of these film club events and additional online materials and resources to go along with some of our festival events. So please follow us on Twitter. We're on Facebook with Human Rights Watch, Instagram, and we have a mailing list you can sign up for. And thank you all so much. Thank you, Carlos, Nicole, Jim, for joining us. And thank you everyone for tuning in. And we'll see you for next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone. See you. Bye.
Yeah.